quite a back and forth in Ottawa last night. There was an interrogation of 3 CEOs, the leaders of Canada's 3 biggest grocery store empires, all about your bill at the checkout.
And I know it doesn't feel like it, but Canada has one of the lowest food inflation rates in the world.
Your company is making $1 million a day in excess profits.
We at Empire are not profiting from inflation.
Do you think $1 million in excess profits a day is reasonable?
So no matter how many times you read it on Twitter, the idea that grocers are causing food inflation is not only false, it's impossible.
And, you know, if we're being perfectly honest, there were some very awkward moments, too.
I have 2,000 plus people that have submitted questions. Will you undertake to respond to these questions?
I'd certainly be delighted to have a look at them. I get feedback, and you know, I don't know if there are similar.
I don't want
volumes.
you to just have a look at them. I want you to respond.
I don't know
to
if there are similar volumes of email that I get, you know, regularly inside Loblaw, and I respond to them on a case by case, on a person by person basis.
It just goes to show you that this hearing was as much about political theater and scoring points as it was about substance. And at its core, our collective outrage that we as Canadians are paying through the nose for our groceries. Some proof from our show earlier this week.
Everything's gone up.
We're definitely eating less meat.
Going to the store and buying a couple items, it feels like I'm spending $50 for a handful of items.
So the latest numbers from StatsCan show us that inflation right now is at like 5 or 6%. But food prices year over year from last January to this January have gone up more than 10%. Have you noticed chicken getting more expensive lately, at $20 a kilogram, getting close to double what the average Canadian would have paid a year ago? Margarine and vegetable oil, that's almost a 50% increase. Like a bunch of suckers, we bought this for $3.49, which is a 142% increase. Now, there are 3 big companies that control most of the grocery store market share in Canada. There's Loblaw Companies, which owns a whole bunch of other chains like No Frills and Provigo. Metro has its own stable of supermarkets, and Empire, which owns Sobeys, Safeway, IGA, and a few others. Well, fast forward to now, and those 3 CEOs, so we're talking about Galen Weston of Loblaw Companies, Michael Medline of Empire, and Eric Laflèche of Metro. They were in the hot seat answering for why food prices are so high and why corporate profits are higher than they've ever been. So, are corporate profits proof of corporate greed? That's the question. And joining us to sort out what was said, and maybe more importantly than what was said, what we actually learned, business reporter Anis Heydari in Calgary. Hey, Anis, how you doing?
I'm good, Andrew. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. So here's how we're going to do it. We're going to watch a clip from last night. You're going to talk to me about the significance of that moment, and then we'll sort of just rinse and repeat a couple times. Does that sound good to you?
Sounds great.
All right, here we go.
Grocery chains operate with extremely small profit margins, which means we have minimal influence on inflation. On a customer's $25 grocery basket, we earn just $1 in profit. That means even if the industry had 0 profits, a $25 grocery bill would still cost $24.
How much profit is too much profit? At a time like this, when Canadians literally are saying that they are struggling, how much is too much then? Like for you, is there no limit to how much profit you can make? On the backs of Canadians that are struggling because they can't afford the groceries, there's no limit?
Reasonable profitability is an important part of operating a successful business. I think at $1 out of $25 of sales, that's reasonable profitability.
Okay, so Anis, one of the biggest issues raised at the hearings was about the profits of the big chains, and the line of attack was pretty clear. But what would you say we learned?
Well, we know that these 3 Canadian grocery heads, they really believe they and their companies aren't to blame for what's happening with food prices right now. We didn't actually learn a lot that was specifically new, and everything they said echoed what we've seen in earnings reports, stock market filings, profit margins as a percentage. They aren't really shooting up that much. Some have actually gone down when it comes to food, but when the sheer number of dollars that everyone is spending goes up, even if that percentage stays the same, that number of dollars in profit, it goes up too, Andrew.
Are you willing to voluntarily give up a portion of the ballooning profits to help the average Canadian family through deeper discounts at the till?
We are I think, generous philanthropists. But you can read the report and you can see everything we're doing in terms of treating our teammates. Some people call them employees, we call them teammates. Well, how we're doing in terms of governance, and how we're doing on sustainability.
But will you offer steeper discounts at the till?
Okay, so yeah, this is something else we've heard an awful lot of, right? That surely if these huge companies are making hundreds of millions of dollars in profits each year, that they could afford to make a little less, and in doing so make our groceries a little cheaper?
You know, it's a good point, but these are companies. They're not charities. You know, we're almost talking about what is capitalism at that point. They exist to make money. You know, we heard from Galen Weston that, you know, there is an expectation that they're going to make profit. Some of these companies pointed out they have made less profit, at least to their perspective. You know, the no-name price freeze comes to mind. But really, the answer was like, we don't want to make less money. We're here to make profit. And frankly, if Canadians expect them to deliberately make less money, who's going to decide that? And how much less is enough less? These are all tough questions to answer. But the companies, they don't want to make less money.
Canadians want to know how you expect them to believe what you've said, which is that your profit margins haven't increased. And I think it's fair to say Canadians feel like the doubling of your profits has been literally at their expense. Are you willing to voluntarily submit your financial statements to the Competition Bureau to clear this matter up?
We do publish our financial statements, as I mentioned, on a quarterly basis. They are fully audited by by an external auditor, and that includes our statements publicly. When we release our results, where it's our responsibility to explain in our documentation and in our analyst calls exactly what has driven the financial performance of the business. We're obligated, through the Securities Commission, to speak the truth about these things, and so you can take what we say as the truth.
Okay, so last thing here, Anis, this demand for transparency and something more than what the companies already make publicly available, and something that would reassure Canadians that these chains are indeed doing everything they can to keep prices down. What did we hear on that front?
One of the things that comes up is with their public statements, we can know what their price or their profit margins are on food or pharmacy, but we don't get breakdowns that go into a lot more detail. And this committee that can't force that. So in the end, all we're hearing is that Canadians need to trust these companies more. That's hard after things like the bread pricing, or the bread price fixing scandal, I should say. There isn't a lot of trust, and it's hard to know when they just say food profit margins have stayed the same. Well, what kind of food? Meat, vegetables, what are we talking about? And we don't have that information. It's hard to trust those president's choices, so to speak.
Yeah, and it might be a while until we get that information, if ever. Anis Heydari, hey, a lot to cram into a short period of time. Thank you so much for that.
You're welcome.